Now, yes, it would be very easy for me to come out here and say, draft Cooper Kupp, draft Amon-Ra St. Brown, draft Garrett Wilson. We all know they're great players. There's a reason that these guys are going in the top 15 picks of fantasy football drafts right now. So we're going to make things a little bit more difficult. I'm going to ignore the wide receivers that are going in the first 3 rounds of fantasy football drafts. And I'm going to be looking at 5 discount options that you are able to get at the wide receiver position in your drafts this year. But before we get into it, make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you play fantasy football and love this channel, I can guarantee you that you are going to love flockfantasy.com. On flockfantasy.com, you can get access to all of my 2023 rankings and get access to all the 2023 rankings of your favorite fantasy football creators, plus so much premium content. And when you sign up with promo code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription. And at the same time, you are going to get an in-depth podcast breaking down your fantasy football team by yours truly. But I think that should be about it. Let's go ahead and let's dive into our first wide receiver here. We are going to be looking at Christian Watson, who currently in underdog drafts is going as the wide receiver 22, 23 off the board. I mean, this is a player that's going directly behind DJ Moore, directly behind DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams, and ahead of Jerry Jeudy, Drake London, and Keenan Allen. Now, yes, and maybe you're saying, well, Mason, why the hell am I going to draft him as the wide receiver 22? Last year, he wasn't that good. Okay, he was the wide receiver 33 last year, but you have to keep in mind, the man was a rookie. And if we're diving into his in-depth numbers of what we saw last year, there were a couple things that stood out that I don't like about the Christian Watson profile. I have to be completely honest with you. I'm not nearly as excited to draft Christian Watson in the 4th round this year as I was to draft Jalen Waddle in the 4th round last offseason, because there is a red flag in that the target share was actually down for Christian Watson. He actually only saw 14% of the Green Bay Packers targets on a per game basis this past season, which isn't great, right? But the main reason that Christian Watson was an effective fantasy football option was actually the touchdown efficiency. He scored a touchdown on over 10% of his targets this past season. Now, that is not sustainable. I can tell you right now that's going to come back down to earth. I mean, you saw the same thing with Chase Claypool in his rookie season, right? But there is a big difference in my mind between Christian Watson's rookie year and what you had with maybe Chase Claypool in his rookie season. While yes, it is a red flag whenever you are looking at a player go out there and score the majority of his fantasy football points with the most volatile statistic year to year, which is touchdown efficiency rather than the target share in his offense. What makes Christian Watson stand out as a phenomenal wide receiver talent is actually his yards per route run. This past season, Christian Watson had a yards per route run of 2.6. Not only was this number 1 for all rookie wide receivers this past year, but on top of this, this was number 6 in the NFL. The wide receivers to have more yards per route run than Christian Watson this past season include Tyreek Hill, he's pretty good. Justin Jefferson, another pretty good wide receiver. A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, and Cooper Kupp. Those were the 5 wide receivers to have more yards per route run than Christian Watson. That is straight up ridiculous, not to mention that Christian Watson was a phenomenal prospect coming out of school. Now, I have no idea why people did not like Christian Watson coming out of college, and I'm still seeing people disrespect the prospect that Christian Watson was by comparing him to guys like Jonathan Mingo. I mean, if you're going to go and look at the market share numbers for Christian Watson, his final season in school, you had him accounting for about 33% of the receptions on a per game basis in college, 44% of his team's receiving yards on a per game basis, and almost 44% of their passing touchdowns per game. So if we're going through these boxes, right, with Christian Watson, he was an elite prospect, phenomenal production profile. With Christian Watson, he has a few red flags from his rookie season by his target share not necessarily being as high as we would like, and maybe his touchdown rate coming back down to earth just slightly. But the number one reason that I'm willing to buy in is from an efficiency standpoint, the only wide receivers that were better were truly elite level options in fantasy. This next season, we should assume that Christian Watson gets an every down workload. And even if the yards per route run number falls from 2.6 down to 2.3, 2.2, he can still easily crush the wide receiver 22 mark, which he currently is being drafted at. So I'm completely fine going through and taking Christian Watson in the majority of these drafts. If I'm picking at the 4-5 turn, Christian Watson's honestly my target. Now, going over to our next guy. This is a wide receiver that I did not draft in a single draft last year. Like, I thought he was one of the most egregious picks when everybody was telling me, oh, Mason, you don't know. You're just an idiot. Didn't you hear? Matt Ryan going to Indianapolis means that Michael Pittman's going to be Julio Jones because Julio Jones' success was always because of Matt Ryan. Okay, I don't understand why people are drafting Michael Pittman at the beginning of the third round in underdog drafts last year. It made zero sense to me. I mean, if you were looking at Michael Pittman going in to 2022, he was coming off a wide receiver 3 season. He was coming off a year where, yes, he had some impressive marks in terms of a 24% team target share. Yes, his yards per route run were elevated. But in general, you shouldn't have been excited about Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan was 37 years old, coming off a very bad season, and the Indianapolis Colts gave up nothing to get him. It made no sense whatsoever why people thought Matt Ryan was going to be good. However, despite Matt Ryan being absolutely horrendous, Matt Ryan, from an adjusted yards per pass attempt standpoint, was at 6.0. The only guys to have a lower adjusted yards per pass attempt than 6.0 were Kenny Pickett, a rookie, Carson Wentz, who's not in the league anymore, and Davis Mills, who will never start another NFL game. The guys directly ahead of Matt Ryan include Zach Wilson. Yes, Zach Wilson was better from an adjusted yards per pass attempt standpoint, as well as Mac Jones. So despite Matt Ryan being a horrendous quarterback last season, Michael Pittman, from a per-game standpoint, was still the wide receiver 23 in fantasy football. So you actually saw Michael Pittman improve his overall fantasy football finish despite the horrendous quarterback play. And now, yes, I'm not sitting here expecting that Anthony Richardson comes in and Anthony Richardson is some phenomenal real-life NFL quarterback. I don't necessarily know how he's going to fit with Michael Pittman, but what I do know is we are now getting Michael Pittman Jr. at a discount. Right now in underdog drafts, Michael Pittman Jr. is going as the wide receiver 28 off draft boards. He is currently going directly behind Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, Drake London, Jerry Jeudy. If I'm getting him at the 5-6 turn in underdog drafts, if I need a wide receiver with that pick, I'm completely fine going through and taking him there, even if we weren't last year, because the quarterback play may be better. It really can't be worse. He finishes the wide receiver 23 last season. Not really worried about Josh Downs. They are two completely different receiving options. So yeah, this is the year to draft Michael Pittman, 100%. But if you aren't going to take Michael Pittman, and instead you want to go through and you want to get someone that maybe has a little more upside, I'm going to be looking at Jackson Smith-Njigba. Now with JSN, he is currently going neck and neck with Pittman. He's directly after him. He's the wide receiver 29, right? So he's a mid-wide receiver 3 in fantasy drafts. And one thing that I want to address, which in my mind is the most laughable thing you are going to hear this offseason, is people looking at the 11 personnel rates that you had for the Seattle Seahawks this past year. You're going to hear a lot, okay, well, I mean, you don't really want to draft Jackson Smith-Njigba because the Seattle Seahawks never have 11 personnel. I mean, they never have 3 wide receivers on the field at the same time. Well, why do we think that is? Do we think it's because Pete Carroll is just some guy who refuses to use a third wide receiver? Or do we think their third wide receiver last year was Marquise Goodwin at 32 years old? And if it wasn't Marquise Goodwin, it was Dwayne Eskridge. The Seattle Seahawks haven't had an effective wide receiver 3, so they haven't used 3 wide receivers. Now that they have the best wide receiver in this year's NFL draft, do we think that Pete Carroll took him so he could stand next to him and look pretty on the sidelines? No, he's going to get on the field. They're going to change their overall offensive scheme. I don't know how hard this is to understand. And if we're looking at Jackson Smith-Njigba, this is a wide receiver that was a phenomenal prospect, right? I mean, 1, we got to talk to him on the red carpet, which is pretty cool, humble brag. And 2, at Ohio State, he was in the best wide receiver room maybe in college football history. He was in a wide receiver room that had Garrett Wilson, who was a year older, Chris Olave, who is 2 years older, and Marvin Harrison Jr., and plus another top 10 pick in next year's draft. So in the best wide receiver room you're essentially ever going to find, Jackson Smith-Njigba posted 1,600 receiving yards where Garrett Wilson, who was older, had 1,000, where Chris Olave, who's 2 years older, had 900. In my mind, JSN immediately comes in, leapfrogs Tyler Lockett. I want to say probably week 4, week 5. But it doesn't really matter because the Seattle Seahawks are going to get 3 wide receivers in the field almost immediately. And I'm going to be really happy to take him, especially if you're like drafting in one of the large tournaments on Underdog, of course. Like if you're in Best Ball Mania, right, where it's literally a $25 buy-in and then a $3 million first place prize. Or if you're in the puppy draft where it's a $5 buy-in and a $75,000 first place prize. If you're in one of those massive Underdog tournaments, what should we be doing? Should we go ahead and should we try to, make sure that we have the pick with the highest floor? Or should we try to chase someone that has the highest ceiling? In my mind, we're chasing someone who has the highest ceiling, and that is going to be JSN. And of course, if y'all want to get in an Underdog draft right now, if you want to get in one of those massive tournaments, I'm sure you've seen us drafting them on the live stream literally every single day. You can go to the comment section, go to the live chat, go to the description, sign up to Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK. You're going to get a 100% deposit match and our 2023 rankings, so make sure you're taking advantage of that. Now, going over to our next guy, I had Bush Sports on the Dynasty channel a couple days ago, and he was pitching Elijah Moore to me. And this is something that I'm going to have to think about a little bit more, and I would really like to know your opinion in the comment section here with Elijah Moore, because it is such a polarizing profile to be looking at, right? If we're going to be looking at Elijah Moore, right now he's being drafted as the wide receiver 50, and last year he was horrible, okay? Elijah Moore in 2022 was very bad. 0.9 yards per route run, okay? 4 targets a game and 11% team target share. This is compared to his rookie season where he actually had 1.8 yards per route run, a target share that was closer to about 19%. Now, of course, we like to see that he was a pretty good wide receiver prospect. Not only was he a pretty good wide receiver prospect, but he had success in year 1. I like to see those positives, and I want to believe that he is significantly more talented than this. But it is difficult to see just how damn bad he was this past year. The one reason why I'm going to be willing to overlook it is, hell, right now he's going behind Odell Beckham Jr. and Rashad Bateman in drafts. In my mind, there's no reason he should be going that low. And 2, I really like to see what the Cleveland Browns gave up to get him. The Cleveland Browns gave up their 2nd round pick for Elijah Moore and a 3rd. And in my mind, if Elijah Moore was just traded for some random compensatory pick, or if he was just traded for some random 5th, 6th rounder, you know what? I'm not interested. I would say that the NFL probably sees that he has no value and he's not a good player. And no, it's not just that he wasn't a right fit with the New York Jets, but because the Cleveland Browns gave up a respectable amount to go get Elijah Moore, I'm a little more willing to buy into the possibility that, hell, maybe at the end of the day, it just wasn't the right fit in New York. Obviously, he was beefing with the coaching staff. But now going over to our next guy, we're going to be looking at a wide receiver that I really liked as a prospect, Jahan Dotson, who also had a decent year 1. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, and maybe I'm a little too high on Jahan Dotson. I like Dotson as a prospect more than I like some of the other rookies in this year's class. Like if you're looking at Zay Flowers right now, who's going right next to Jahan Dotson in drafts, I thought Jahan Dotson was a better prospect than Zay Flowers. And on top of this, Jahan Dotson flashed ability year 1. Now, looking at his counting stats, going to be a little difficult because remember, Jahan Dotson was a player that dealt with injuries through the course of the season and also had very bad quarterback play. Now, this is the one reason why I'm not willing to go all in on Jahan Dotson. And he is being drafted as a wide receiver 4 in fantasy, is because the quarterback play is probably going to be bad again this next year. That's something that I can't get away from. But if you're looking at his market share numbers at Penn State, the man, his final 2 seasons there was accounting for like 40% of the Penn State passing offense, which is exceptional. It's more than what you saw from Zay Flowers at Boston College. And with Jahan Dotson, he does go out there, account for about 5 targets a game, scores touchdowns at a pretty good clip. That may come back down to earth just a little bit. Overall, the man was the wide receiver 42 as a rookie last year through an injury-riddled season. And now he's being drafted as a wide receiver 42 going into year 2. In my mind, it's probably a pick that just has a lot of upside, not much downside. But I think that's all I have for y'all. Again, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, please go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you play fantasy football, I can almost guarantee you are going to love flockfantasy.com. Go to the link in the comment section, get a 2-day free trial with promo code FLOCK and 30% off any subscription. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate you and really hope you have a great day.